You're sitting in a cave in what is now southern Germany. It's roughly 40,000 years ago. Outside, it's an ice age. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it rearranges your priorities. There's no Spotify. There's no Sad Girl Autumn playlist. There's just you, the dark, the cold, and the people around you who are, statistically speaking, the only reason you're still alive. And one of them picks up a hollow vulture bone and carves 5 holes into it and blows. This is the story of how humans discovered music. Not concerts, not Spotify Wrapped, not the guy at every party who insists on playing acoustic guitar uninvited. We're talking about the very first time a human being deliberately shaped sound into something rhythmic, repeatable, and emotional. And the evidence for when that happened is way older and way weirder than you'd expect. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Music doesn't start with songs, it doesn't start with instruments, melodies, or anything you'd recognize as music today. It almost certainly starts with rhythm. Before a single note existed, there was probably just beat, and that distinction, rhythm before melody, might be one of the most important clues we have about why music exists at all. Let's start with the hard physical evidence, because unlike most prehistoric behavior, this one actually survived in the ground. In 2008, a team led by archaeologist Nicholas Conrad of the University of Tübingen excavated a cave called Hohlefels in southern Germany. Buried in 12 scattered pieces was a flute carved from the hollow wing bone of a griffin vulture. Once reassembled, it formed an 8.5-inch instrument with 5 finger holes and a notched mouthpiece. Conrad determined the flute dated to roughly 40,000 years ago, right around the time modern humans first settled in the region. Nearby, at a cave called Geisenklosterla, researchers found even older fragments. When redated in 2012 using updated methods, those bone flute pieces turned out to be approximately 42,000 years old. That makes them, depending on which dating round you trust, the oldest confirmed musical instruments on Earth. And then there's the controversial one. In 1995, an archaeologist named Ivan Turk discovered a cave bear femur in Divje Bab, Slovenia, with 4 neatly spaced holes drilled into it. It was found at a Neanderthal campsite, and some researchers dated it to over 43,000 years ago. For years, it was hailed as proof Neanderthals made music too. Then other scientists looked closer and noticed something deeply unromantic. Many researchers now believe those holes weren't carved at all, but were puncture marks left by cave bears chewing the bone. So is it a Neanderthal flute or a snack? Honestly, nobody's fully sure. Archaeology is sometimes just a very long argument about bones. Here's where it gets interesting. The Hohlefels flute wasn't a one-off curiosity. It was found alongside flint tools, worked ivory, and the bones of hunted horses, reindeer, and mammoths, suggesting it was part of daily, lived culture, not some isolated ritual object. Whoever made this thing wasn't a specialist musician with a workshop. They were a hunter-gatherer who also happened to carve a 5-hole, acoustically tuned wind instrument out of bird bone, in an ice age, with stone tools. It was so well made that when researchers later built a replica from the same type of bone, they were able to play it and record actual melodies. So why does a flute matter this much? Because a flute isn't a primitive accident. It requires planning. You have to select the right bone, hollow it correctly, calculate where to place the holes for actual pitch, and practice using it. Conrad's team argued these finds point to a well-established musical tradition already in place by the time modern humans arrived in Europe. Translation: by the time we have any physical evidence of music at all, music wasn't new. It was already a tradition, which means the real origin of music is older than the oldest flute we've ever found. Possibly by a huge margin, because instruments made of wood, reed, or skin would have rotted away tens of thousands of years before anyone with a trowel showed up. Now let's get to the actual question buried in all this. Did rhythm come before melody? This is where a cognitive archaeologist named Stephen Mythen enters the story, and where things go from interesting to borderline mind-bending. In his book, The Singing Neanderthals, Mythen argues that long before modern language existed, our ancestors communicated using something that wasn't quite speech and wasn't quite song. He proposes that musicality may have evolved before language or alongside it in early hominins. He calls this hypothetical communication system which stands for holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic. Yes, that's a real academic term. Yes, it's spelled with that many M's. The idea is that instead of words, early humans and Neanderthals relied on rhythm, pitch, gesture, and tone to communicate emotion and intent. And here's the part that connects directly to your body, right now, today. Mathan points out that the evolution of walking upright required the brain to develop precise rhythmic coordination, just to keep the body moving without falling over. Every step you take is a tiny rhythmic event your nervous system is unconsciously timing. According to this theory, the same neural machinery that lets you walk in a steady rhythm is ancestrally connected to the machinery that lets you feel a beat. Bipedalism may have built the hardware. Music came along later and used it. This is also why babies respond to rhythm before they understand a single word. Mython highlights infant-directed speech, the sing-song, exaggerated melodic voice adults instinctively use with babies, as evidence that musicality may be developmentally and emotionally prior to language itself. You weren't taught to respond to a soothing rhythmic voice. You were born wired for it. Which means somewhere in your nervous system right now is a leftover piece of machinery that may be older than language itself. Let's talk about why any of this would have mattered for survival, because evolution doesn't keep expensive traits around for fun. This is where the group bonding piece comes in, and it might be the actual reason music exists at all. Mython's argument, building on decades of anthropological work, is that shared rhythmic activity, singing together, drumming together, moving together, creates a kind of social synchronization that ordinary speech can't. He draws on a striking real account from historian William McNeill, who described how the repetitive, seemingly pointless rhythm of military drill in World War II produced an unexpected feeling of personal enlargement and collective unity among soldiers. McNeill wasn't writing about music. He was writing about marching in step. But the mechanism is identical. Synchronized rhythm dissolves the boundary between me and us. Modern neuroscience backs this up completely. Groups that move or vocalize in rhythm together show measurable increases in trust, cooperation, and even pain tolerance compared to groups doing the same activity out of sync. Shared rhythm doesn't just feel nice. It chemically and neurologically synchronizes people. For a species that survived by hunting in coordinated groups, defending territory together, and raising children communally, that kind of instant, deep social glue would have been an enormous survival advantage. A group that could bond fast, trust fast, and move as one was a group far more likely to make it through a hard winter than a group of brilliant, talented individualists who didn't fully trust each other. So when those ancient humans at Hohlefels sat in a cave 40,000 years ago, passing around a carved bone flute, they probably weren't performing a concert. Conrad himself suggested the flutes were likely used across a wide range of social settings, not as specialized entertainment, but as part of ordinary communal life. They were doing something closer to bonding, to synchronizing a group of cold, frightened, hungry people into a single unit that could trust each other enough to survive the next hunt, the next winter, the next decade. Here's the uncomfortable part, or maybe the beautiful part, depending on how you look at it. The original research team behind the Hohlefels discovery suggested that music may have helped early modern humans build larger, more cohesive social networks than Neanderthals were capable of forming, possibly giving our species a real competitive edge during a period when both groups were competing for the same shrinking resources. If that's true, then music wasn't a luxury our ancestors developed once survival was handled. Music may have been one of the things that helped them survive in the first place. We didn't get good at staying alive and then invent music as a reward. Music might have been part of the machinery that kept us alive at all. So when did humans first discover music? The honest answer is the same one you keep running into in these videos. Probably much earlier than any artifact we've ever found, because rhythm doesn't fossilize. Clapping doesn't fossilize. Humming around a fire doesn't fossilize. What we can say for certain is that by 42,000 years ago, humans were already carving precision wind instruments out of bird bone in the middle of an ice age, and that the rhythmic, social, bonding instinct underneath that flute was almost certainly older than the flute itself. Maybe as old as walking on two legs. Every time you tap your foot without thinking, hum along in a car with your friends, or feel that strange lump in your throat when a stadium full of strangers sings the same song at the same time, you're triggering a piece of cognitive machinery that may date back tens of thousands of years before anyone thought to write anything down. You're not just enjoying a song, you're running an ancient survival program that once helped a small, freezing, vulnerable group of humans become an us instead of a collection of me's. Anyway, I'm off to go play Wonderwall badly. Don't worry, I'll add a flute solo. See you next video.